Okay, hi, my name is Dr. Chuck Weber. I am the CEO and Medical Director of the Family Care Center. My wife and I started this business in 2016 after I retired from the military. Had about 27 years in service, and it's just been a pleasure to be here, to be part of this community, and to really focus on our DoD, our family members, our veterans, and of course this community. You know, I really appreciate, especially during this time right now, you're coming out or viewing this online or coming here or making an appointment or even just sending your patients here, the referral sites, and of course the patients themselves. I mean, it is a huge challenge to get over that personal stigma, to ask for help, to say, hey, you know what, I think I need a battle buddy right now. And so for you to have both identified that as the referral source, as a community leader, or to know that, hey, this is the place that you can get this help and we care. So thank you for trusting us, thank you for trusting Family Care Center, and hopefully that you can see just a little bit of a glimpse of what we're doing right now and where we're going to go. So I want to take a little bit of a break and just kind of say, hey, how did we start this? So it's not going to be that much of a leap, right? My wife is a veteran as well. She's a family practice doc. She spent about 7 years in. After our second child, very difficult for dual military to do anything. Those in the military will definitely understand. Kind of hard when the military have competing missions to do, well, our families sometimes fall short. So that kind of laid the groundwork of what can we do? Well, she moved to be a GS, government employee, and she moved around with me. And during our marriage, we've been together a couple decades, moved her about 9 times. So our deal was that she gets to pick the last spot. Well, what other spot could there be so beautiful than Colorado Springs, Fort Carson, USAFA, Peterson, just a wonderful area. But it wasn't the atmosphere or the 4 seasons all in one day. No, it was the community. This community that cares about veterans, cares about the military, cares about Colorado and Colorado Springs. And seeing that dedication, it was intoxicating. And seeing what that permeated all the way towards not only the care and the quality providers that we have here, it's very easy to kind of, we get these quality, caring providers and just get out of their way, right? And they just deliver incredible care. But also our community, scouting, whether that be our church, whether it be our neighbors, the family and friends that we've kind of found here. This was just an incredible community. So it was an easy leap towards that. But the other part was the mission, right? The mission to kind of see that there were some difficulties that we had in delivering behavioral health care in an outpatient sense. In general, sometimes it's very difficult to find somebody who will accept TRICARE or the VA for the community care network. And so we saw that there was just this huge gap. And we kind of had the Family Care Center. And we started with a handful of people, maybe a couple handfuls, and then we built it. We've built it through a little bit of blood, sweat, and tears, all the way going to our aquarium even, where we had to find it on Craigslist and then scrape away all the ickiness from the Craigslist aquarium and kind of changing it and transforming it. And that's very much as a kind of a metaphor as we kind of, started the Family Care Center, not taking any salary, trying to put everything back in the business, do a little elbow grease, seeing lots of patients, trying to refine things, make a lot of mistakes. Just like the aquarium, we killed a lot of fish initially, not on purpose, just of not knowing. The military has done a great job with teaching you leadership, how to teach you sacrifice, perseverance, and chaos, right? So it's pretty close to starting a business. However, the ins and outs of starting the business wasn't really taught to us. So we've done a little bit of discovery learning, and I've had some great mentors along the way, and I've learned quite a lot. Well, now, kind of fast forward, going now in February will be our 5th year, and this has just been an incredible journey. We've now kind of moved to 4 locations. The original place of Quail Lake, where we were renting, we were delivering great care, we were doing great things, but almost all of our complaints were parking. We had outgrown that place, and it's it's just been just a wonderful kind of adventure to kind of move to there and then try to find something that had good bones and just needs a little bit of love and a little bit of makeup and kind of upgrade. And we found that here at Circle Drive. And so this location here, we've moved from an 8,400 square foot spot to an 82,000 square foot spot. Now, we haven't taken over the building. We have lots of renters and other things, but we have transformed at least 2 floors, and we're looking at a 3rd floor, at least part of it, as we kind of expand and deliver the services that the community needs. And those services are going to be pretty much comprehensive outpatient. So we don't do inpatient, we don't do IOP yet, looking into that. What we really do is deliver just quality care that's culturally competent for the military, culturally competent for delivering compassionate care, and evidence-based. So we're going to do evidence-based treatment here. There's a lot of great holistic things that might have different venues or different skill sets. We've been really focused on that. We've been focusing on the evidence-based on how can we treat depression, PTSD, anxiety, substance use. I'm addiction board certified as well. So we have that whole gambit, both in talk therapy, individual therapy, children, and trauma, and then of course medication management with all different levels. Most of us are all military or taking care of military. We also have transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is just an incredible tool and an incredible technology for treatment-resistant depression. We have a sister service that we've partnered with that provides ketamine as well. And so still evidence-based, but a lot of insurance, well, no insurances will take it, frankly. But that being said, there still is a place for it, but it's still in an outpatient sense. And so when we've done this is brought together some incredible talent of people who care about the community, care about our military, our family members, and our veterans, and given them the mission, deliver quality care, reduce suffering, bring people hope, and do good for our community. So I really appreciate you trusting us for that. So just a little bit, these are just a little bit what is in the office, and we'll take a picture of the aquarium and things, but we all have a journey, right? We've all had a lot of challenges, especially in the military. It's going to take you from your social norms, whether you're a family member or a military or a brat. They've taken you away and changed your environment, every year, every couple years, but change is coming, right? And it's going to test that resiliency. And what it's going to really do is keep raising the bar. And that is what my mentors in the military has really done for me. Start off enlisted and digging foxholes and carrying lots of heavy stuff and being what an infantryman does. What it really taught me was I probably did not have the body to do that for the rest of my life. I better hit the books. And someone believed in me, and then I got accepted to West Point. And I think that I was definitely a lot more talent there than I had, but not a lot of more persistence than I did because they haven't been, to the desert yet. And digging a foxhole in chemical suit with a pickaxe can definitely give you another perspective on life. But even then, after even going to med school, I knew that I wanted to care for people, and I didn't actually, I liked psychiatry, I liked my rotations, but I was focusing a little bit more on internal medicine, and I did flight surgery or a utilization tour for a couple years. And even on one of my deployments, just this, nameplate and everything, even getting that kind of reminded me that these are all little tokens or something of a stepping stone of where I should go and what does God have planned for me. So with prayer and kind of trying to listening that you might not have all the answers, and if you want to make God laugh, you just make plans. So by having that kind of flexibility has allowed us to kind of grow this to a pretty incredible level. And flight surgery is awesome. I love taking care of our aviators, but still it is primary care for aviation. So it is a grind, and getting to know the patient and getting to know that individual in front of me, that's more than just symptoms, more than a diagnosis, and how do we help them in a holistic sense, in the biological, psychological, social, spiritual, and how do we see those deficits and kind of push them like, hey, you can do this with help, with your battle buddy, with the coach, the counselor, just a little bit of medication to take the edge off, and let's get you to that better place. And I think that's what we do here at Family Care Center, and I've just been really humbled to be surrounded by so many talented people. So once again, thank you for coming to our open house. Thank you for trusting us. We look forward to serving Colorado Springs and the whole Front Range as I try to kind of encroach into other areas and also seek those places that maybe veterans have difficulty getting to, especially in the rural kind of aspects. And then we are looking at going to different military posts and bases and seeing that there's a deficit in more than just Colorado Springs, and how can we serve our community in those particular areas, especially with our unique skill set and cultural competency in the military. So, thank you so much, and appreciate your time.
This is the future. Circle, taking over 2 of the floors. We'll see you make it more veteran-centric and behavioral health and medical in general. Thank you. Thank you for these blessings.
Hi, I'm Bill Linn. I'm the Vice President of Heritage Arsenal, and we were commissioned by the Family Care Center to create an exhibit in tribute to the 1st Cavalry Division in Vietnam. And with that guidance, what you see behind me is the exhibit that we've now unveiled. So let me go through what we were able to put together. So when you think about the 1st Cavalry Division, why was it significant? What was significant about that division? Well, it was the longest deployed division in the Vietnam War, 1965 to 1972. Fought some of the most famous battles and, in fact, had suffered the most casualties of any Army division in the entire war. So this air mobile concept started at Fort Benning in 1963 and 64 with the 11th Air Assault Division test. And what they were trying to prove was that use of helicopters to bring ground troops to key locations in mass was going to create an incredible advantage in modern warfare. And they were successful in doing that. Well, in 1965, the 1st Cavalry Division had been permanently assigned in Korea. Were now coming home to the States. So what they did is they took the 11th Air Division, reflagged it the 1st Cavalry Division Air Mobile. 27 days later, the President of the United States gave them orders to Vietnam. So they are the first division to find themselves on the ground. And once they arrived in August of 1965, very soon thereafter, after they sorted themselves out with almost 16,000 soldiers, 400 to 500 helicopters, they had been issued the first issue of the M16 assault rifle. They had been issued the first subdued insignia ever used. They go in November 14th and 15th of 1965 into LZ X-ray in the Ia Drang Valley. And what I'd love to do is cut to Colonel Herren, John D. Herren, the B Company commander on LZ X-ray, 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry Division, to speak about his experience.
Veterans and family members, I feel honored to represent the 1st Cavalry Division, the 1st team, in the dedication of this exhibit, recognizing the historic 14 to 17 November 1965 Ia Drang battle in the Central Highlands of South Vietnam. And I'd like to thank Lieutenant Colonel Bill Linn for putting on the exhibit, for Dr. Chuck Weber for asking for this 1st CAV exhibit in the center, and Carlos Urias of the center, who I coordinate with. The book We Were Soldiers Once and Young was written by my battalion commander, Hal Moore, and Joe Galloway, a reporter who was there for most of the battle. It aptly describes the details of the battle and portrays the action in the movie, We Were Soldiers. I thought the movie was 70% authentic. I know one of the sergeants said if Colonel Moore, who was played by Mel Gibson, was doing all that fighting back at the command center, what were we doing on the front lines? My role in the battle was as the B Company commander. I had commanded that company for a year and a half and trained it in the new air assault concept, which was a concept that led to the designation of the 1st Cavalry Division as an air mobile division. I knew the company well, the men. I had outstanding NCOs, I had good soldiers, and the only ones I didn't know that well were 3 new lieutenants who had come in just before we deployed to Vietnam. So my company landed on LZ X-ray on 14 November. I was the lead company of the 1st to 7th Battalion. And we landed in the foothills of the Chu Pong Mountain. My mission was to secure the landing zone. However, when we captured a North Vietnamese soldier, who I will call NVAs, we learned that there were a lot of enemy in the foothills there that wanted to kill Americans. So Colonel Moore immediately changed my mission to one of moving up towards the mountain. He did that because he knew that if the NVAs were going to attack the LZ, he needed to keep them away while we brought in the rest of the battalion. That was a difficult thing to do in a short time, because you only could get 8 helicopters in there at one time, which is only part of my company. The other 8 helicopters were hovering above, and they came in, so you really got most of my company in one lift, but then they had to go back and get the rest of the battalion. And that took time. So we moved out towards those foothills of the mountain, and we accomplished our mission. The 1st platoon made contact with a large group, and they got in a firefight and got basically pinned down. And my 2nd platoon, which was led by an aggressive young lieutenant, moved his platoon out after about 4 or 5 NVAs were in the woods, and unfortunately broke contact with the rest of the company. At that time, he got into a very fierce fight, hand to hand, and I told him to grab a piece of terrain and defend if he could. He did that with the help of support from the rest of the soldiers and a machine gun crew, which died supporting that movement to the defensive position. However, soon after he was killed, the platoon sergeant was killed, and if it wasn't for a sergeant by the name of Ernie Savage, who crawled over and got the radio and called my artillery forward observer and me, and started getting in artillery fire, we would have lost that platoon. The sergeant called in fire. He designated different barrages all around the platoon, and really basically kept that platoon alive the rest of the day and throughout the night. When I learned that the 2nd platoon had been cut off, I was very concerned. And so my 3rd platoon, which was in reserve, was over on the other side of the LZ and had moved over to be in on the movement towards the foothills. So I knew it was over there, and I was going to go over there, but I stopped momentarily to make better contact with the battalion and keep contact with that 2nd platoon. And that delay, plus some other reasons, kept me from getting to the company in time to go to actually get involved in a move by the 3rd platoon, 1 platoon from A company, and some of B and some of the 1st platoon to go get the platoon, because that's what I ordered them to do. My XO led that, and they didn't get very far. The NVA had already gotten in good positions, and firepower was too much. So they backed off. And I got there about the time they had returned to the creek bed, and we were taking a pretty good machine gun fire from an angle about 75 yards away. At that time, I witnessed a young lieutenant from the A Company platoon charge out to the Gant Hill, flip a grenade over it, then go around, kill all 3 North Vietnamese, one being a big guy who looked like a Chinese. And then he was shot through the neck, and we brought him back. Meanwhile, the rest of the LZ was under a lot of fire, and companies were still coming in. It took most of the rest of that afternoon to get everybody in, and then the fighting died down because we had artillery and gunships and so on providing cover. So at that time, Colonel Moore wanted me and the A Company commander to go get the 2nd platoon and to meet him to go do that. So A Company and I both went out. A Company was the closest to the mountain, and I was on his right. He didn't get very far before he started taking casualties. And it was getting dark. I took a few, but I was not under the fire that he was. So we had to back off. But we did keep that platoon alive, and actually there were no more soldiers killed at that platoon, that second platoon, the rest of after that initial action. So we settled down for the night. There were a few probes, and the next morning, Colonel Moore wanted Colonel Nadal, the A Company commander, and me to meet with him and plan to go get the second platoon, but we never got to do that because our C Company was attacked by a large enemy force that had crawled up during the early morning hours and gotten so close to the C Company that they couldn't bring artillery fire in. So their company commander was wounded, the executive was wounded, and we almost got overrun. That's about the time that Colonel Moore called a Mayday. A Mayday means that there's an American unit about to be overrun, and all available aircraft were to come to our support, and they did. And through the air power, they were dropping napalm, bombing, and so on, and fighting that ensued. We got the North Vietnamese to retreat and quit the battlefield. So that was the end of that morning, early afternoon. And later on, about mid-afternoon or a little before that, another battalion came in by foot. And Colonel Moore ordered them to give me security so I could get the second platoon, which I did. I brought them back. We had 8 killed, 16 wounded out of 31 men. A terrible loss for that platoon, and it affected me deeply. Following that, we again settled down for the night, and the next morning, we had been reinforced by elements of two companies of the 2nd and the 7th, the first night and the second night. And so they were those elements and part of our units on that southeastern corner of the LZ were well dug in. They had their fires trained, they had their flip wire, their wires out and everything else, and trip wires. And so when the enemy attacked, which was sort of a dumb thing to do at the same place, they beat them back and killed a lot of them, and we had almost no casualties at all. They also brought in a lot of artillery to help out. So that basically ended the fighting at LZ X-ray, and we were evacuated, and we went back to a base camp later on that day. I'd like to switch now to talking about one of my medics who had severe PTSD. He had crawled around the platoon delivering water and ammunition from the wounded to other men and bandaging the wounds, and some of my soldiers were pretty badly wounded, and I think he saved them. But anyway, he was discharged from the Army. He got the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions with that platoon, but his wife died of cancer, and he couldn't shake PTSD. He went to the VA, but I don't think the VA thought that that was a serious disease, and they treated him as they could. He worked with them for a while, but then he started drinking and he became a hermit. And he called me a lot. He said he was sleeping on the floor and so on. And anyway, and he died, which was really tragic ending to his life. And he had been a heroic soldier. I say that because I think this center is innovative and so good to fill a need that veterans have for mental health care, including PTSD, TBI, and so on. The VA does a much better job than they did in Vietnam because it is considered now a serious disease. But the capabilities this center offers are really quite something. And I take my hat off to Chuck Weber for putting this all together. And I think you're supposed to examine, I understand you may expand to other military communities throughout the country. That would be great. So that's the end of my talk. Best of luck to you. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Wear your mask. Goodbye.
So what we have in here are some artifacts that are attributed to then Captain John D. Herren, who commanded B Company of 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment, 1st Cavalry Division on LZ X-ray. Now, these are indicative of items that would have been attributed to many 7th Cavalry and 1st Cavalry Division troopers on the ground. But we just happen to be fortunate enough to be able to acquire some of Colonel Retired Herren's items, and let me take you through those. So this is the actual copy of the certificate that he would have received, awarding him the Silver Star, the 3rd highest award for valor that the United States can give. What's interesting about the Silver Stars that they were giving, these were actually struck during the Second World War, and there were still stockpiles of these particular versions of the Silver Star even in 1965. And so actually Colonel Herren received a World War II vintage Silver Star for his actions in Vietnam. You see the orders that actually give a more of a description of his actions on the ground that day. You see Colonel Herren to the left of General Knowles. General Knowles was commanding the forward command post of the 1st Division, 1st Cavalry Division in Vietnam, and actually came out to visit the day before Colonel Herren and his troopers went into LZ X-ray in the Ia Drang Valley. You also see one of these award folders where all the awards that were given in Vietnam, they would have been slipped into a folder, a presentation folder just like this, and this is an original one. What we have that's absolutely fabulous is this example of a 1st pattern jungle top, the 1st jungle uniform issued to the U.S. Army, and this one happened to be issued to none other than Captain John D. Herren in 1965. What is indicative of the 1st pattern are these exposed buttons. There's little adjuster tabs at the waist and the epaulets. And what's really great about this is he actually went to a local tailor shop and had all of the insignia on it handmade on a sewing machine. And so this is just straight out of the battlefield. And what's interesting is the center picture is future Lieutenant General Hal Moore, then Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore, commanding the 1st Battalion, and Captain Herren's immediate boss. You can see that he's wearing the exact same uniform in the award ceremony for the Ia Drang Valley, and you can see his Distinguished Service Cross pinned to his uniform. Then Lieutenant Colonel Moore received the Distinguished Service Cross, the 2nd highest award for valor. There were actually 3 Medals of Honor eventually awarded for actions at LZ X-ray that day in 1965. What we also have as a resource is a book co-written by Hal Moore and Joe Galloway called We Were Soldiers Once and Young. You may recognize this. Eventually became the Mel Gibson, Sam Elliott movie, We Were Soldiers, and very, very popular. But this is the book that started it all, and it's the absolute quintessential history of the actions at LZ X-ray. What is interesting about Hal Moore, highly decorated, goes on to become a 3-star general. What's interesting about Joe Galloway, never served in the military, was an actual reporter on the ground who took the opportunity to infiltrate onto LZ X-ray with the troopers of the 7th CAV, and actually becomes the first American ever awarded the Bronze Star for Valor as a civilian. So quite interesting. We also have below, though there's no attributional history or provenance associated, we have a classic captured North Vietnamese flag, which is it definitely was on the battlefield, grungy, faded, and it really rounds out this exhibit that we were pleased to present here in conjunction with the grand opening. Hi, I'm Bill Linn. I'm the Vice President of Heritage Arsenal, and we were commissioned by the Family Care Center to install an exhibit. And our guidance was World War II, 101st Airborne with a medical theme. And so what I want to do is take you through some of the historic artifacts behind me in the exhibit case and explain them in more detail. So on the wall behind is a 1940 Life magazine. What's interesting about the cover, it shows an American parachutist in training. This is the first time that a paratrooper is featured in a magazine in the United States, because we had just then started our parachute program at Fort Benning, Georgia. To the right of that magazine is a great theater-made, custom-made, tailored uniform, which would have been commissioned in Great Britain by a U.S. paratrooper. And in this case, we know who this paratrooper is. Sergeant Lastly actually participated in the D-Day invasion, the jump into Holland in September of that same year, 1944. And he also participated in the defense of Bastogne in the Ardennes forest during the famous Battle of the Bulge in December of that year. All of those harrowing experiences, Sergeant Lastly was able to come home without a scratch. Was not wounded during the entire combat experience in the European theater. We have a hat here that would have been worn by a medical sergeant. You can see that by the medical piping that's on that cap, as well as the glider cap patch, which would have designated him being on jump status in an airborne unit. We have a couple of French notes here, French francs. Interestingly enough, before the D-Day invasion on June 6, 1944, the United States printed billions of francs. They had 19 truckloads of currency show up and issue these out to the U.S. invading forces, and actually docked them $4.03 in advance pay each man. What was interesting is they thought that this new currency would be embraced on the continent in occupied France, but actually the French were suspicious of this, and even Charles de Gaulle considered them counterfeit, so they fell into disuse almost immediately. And down below, we have an aid station flag, would have flown outside of a casualty collection aid station to designate where casualties were brought on the battlefield. As well, it would have also indicated that area as a protected space in accordance with the Geneva Convention. You'll see the brown boots down low. Those are particular issue to U.S. Army soldiers during World War II. To the parachute troops only. And these boots in particular were worn by a sergeant in the 501st Parachute Infantry from Mississippi. And he was a veteran of not only the D-Day invasion, but the Holland parachute jump, as well as Bastogne in the Ardennes forest. We also have a medical aid bag that is so designated by that Red Cross. That was carried by a medical sergeant in the 101st Airborne on the combat jump into Holland, September 17th and 18th of 1944. So on the right side of this exhibit is a full mannequin, which we have a Model 42 airborne issued jumpsuit. And it was designed, obviously, in 1942. It was issued to our parachute troops immediately following, and would have been the uniform worn by U.S. forces in the 101st Airborne and the 82nd Airborne on their jump into Normandy, France on the night of D-Day, June 6, 1944. This particular uniform is a reproduction, but it is illustrative of exactly how those uniforms would have been worn. So you can see around the pocket seams as well as on the wear points at the knees and on the elbows, it has been reinforced with canvas material by the riggers who would have been assigned to the airborne divisions. It also has a name tape on it that would have been actually created with black shoe polish. That was actually how they did that. You can see the absence of insignia on it because, again, this was a tactical environment and they didn't want to wear anything flashy into a combat zone. And in this particular example, it has modified pockets up on the sleeve. So extra pockets. Of course, the parachute troops carried a lot of equipment. The helmet, the M1C, the C designator, illustrating that it's an airborne issue, is interesting in that the modifications are the further reinforcement of the chin strap, as well they wear this leather aviation chin cup that would have kept that helmet on a paratrooper's head when that jolt of the opening shock of the parachute in midair could have allowed equipment to spill off and cut away. Behind this mannequin is a very famous scene. So that is the steeple of the St. Mary-Église Chapel in St. Mary-Église, France. St. Mary-Église, France has a designation of being the first village in occupied France to be liberated on D-Day. Now on that steeple, and it is also illustrated in the movie The Longest Day, is a mannequin and parachute hanging from that steeple. That mannequin actually represents an actual paratrooper by the name of John Steele, who served with 2nd Battalion, 505th, 82nd Airborne Division, who the night of D-Day had his chute caught on that spire. He feigned death because the Germans were running around in the courtyard below, and he was eventually rescued from that steeple and survived the war. He was made an honorary citizen of St. Mary-Église, and he came back very often after the war as a celebrated hero.